We did not want to show whether reporting on migration was positive or negative, but rather we wanted to learn how journalists often unintentionally, through their choice of diction, framing and imagery, contribute to less or more robust forms of reporting. One pervasive habit that we found, which could be translated into an easy mechanical lesson for the journalists who want to improve their reporting, pertained to the consistency in the use of active voice. When speaking of refugees and migrants, journalists would overwhelmingly speak in passive, speaking of refugees being quote-unquote taken somewhere by buses or quote-unquote given food. So they were portrayed as being on the receiving end of the decisions of authorities, and the authorities, again, as a result of the use of passive voice, were often not even mentioned, so no one was held accountable for the development of events. The Hungarian channels, in addition to this, portrayed refugees and migrants as forming their own fate almost exclusively when they were aggressive or determined, when they quote-unquote rile each other up, or quote-unquote attack, or quote-unquote go through everything. A more challenging suggestion would be to better describe the substance of the disagreements about migration, typically between the V4 and the EU, to better describe the causes of events, to better describe the possible solutions on the table. Instead of this, all V4 broadcasters overwhelmingly framed the disputes about migration as various forms of power struggles, with emphasis ranging from bargaining and negotiation all the way to blame games and finger pointing. In the late June-July 2018 period, we found the content of 3 channels to match all or most of James Brown's criteria for propaganda. That was the Hungarian state-run MTV, the private TV2 and the Polish state-run TVP. There was, however, a substantial difference in the brand of propaganda aired by the Hungarian channels and the Polish channel, with the Polish propaganda being loyalist. So it cheered for the government. Many reports, for instance, featured or culminated in allusions to various problems, quote, caused as well by the previous government, unquote, and so on. Whereas the Hungarian brand of propaganda was intensely subject-specific, so it was consistent with what is referred to as the creation of moral panic. Refugees and migrants were made into a singular threat to Hungary and Hungarians, often by associating migration with crime and terrorism. This was supported by references to unverified articles from the self-referential centralized pro-government media system, or by unverified stories that were previously disseminated by outlets owned by the Russian government, or stories previously disseminated by hyper-political outlets like Breitbart, or by featuring talking heads from pro-government think tanks like Századveg. One example that relates to the difference between the loyalist and subject-specific propaganda was the use of double standards in the newscast of the Hungarian state-run MTV from September 2015. Throughout this newscast, they referred to the football hooligans who were in Budapest as quote-unquote ultras. But in the news item, which described the attack of the hooligans on refugee men, women and children camping in front of the Keleti train station as quote-unquote football fans, the anchor meanwhile used patronizing language to describe the attack. Such implicit near endorsements of violence against refugees are obviously a concern. There are, however, hardly any editors working for the pro-government media with time, inclination, or mental capacity left to reflect on this matter. Meanwhile, there are no well-established nor widely accepted rules to which the reporters could refer to in their disputes with the editors, and so the reporters are left with somewhat limited options when they want to affect the content other than quitting.